Hey guys, Daniel Markham here. I'm the guy who wrote the domain model for domain modeling. I want to talk just for a couple of minutes about John Dewey because I'm not sure when we'll come back to him. And I want to make sure you guys understand that he's really not the cornerstone of this course, but his ideas sort of frame up what I'm talking about. And it's important to understand both what he said, why it's important, and kind of this place he lived, right? So, John Dewey was one of the American pragmatists. There was three or four of them. They're sort of intellectual descendants of C.S. Peirce, which will show up later. Dewey was a professor concerned mostly with education in America. The reason I'm bringing up this professor dude is because I think when you start talking about philosophers, their eyes kind of glaze over, and either they get really bored or they dive really deep and I'm an existentialist and I'm agnostic and I'm this and I'm that. I'm a rationalist. And they start sort of hero worshiping various people. And these people tend to be, both sides of this team tend to be quite miserable. So it's really important to understand why I'm mentioning philosophers and sort of what to think about what I'm talking about, because it's not boring. It's kind of fun. Philosophy went back and forth over the centuries. Oh my goodness, wow. What is truth? What is beauty? What is justification? Well, they really like to talk about a bunch of stuff. Boy, those dudes. And it kind of all comes out in word soup after a while. But there's a reason why it didn't work out. There's a reason why it's frustrating. There's a reason why most people have a hard time with it. I know several people who went to college and majored in philosophy and were unhappy with it. Now, I know a few people that were quite happy. So I think the way to look at philosophy is not as a religion or sort of a hero worship thing. And that's what Dewey and the pragmatists taught. The pragmatists had this thing called the Pragmatic Maxim, and it was stated several different ways. It boils down to, do what works. I read a really good essay a year or two ago by a guy who did technology. I forget who he was. He was a founder of a big company. And he had studied philosophy. And he said, people try to dedicate their life to one philosophy or another as if they were sort of joining a church. He said, that's not the way to look at it. The way to look at it is these different people had these really cool ideas that I can use right now to go somewhere I need to go. And that's the pragmatic maxim, right? It's, hey, here's some cool stuff. I pick it up, I use it for a while, I get where I want to go, and I put it down, pick something up later. And one of the jokes I make in the book is every philosopher that I know that was famous went too far. They had some really cool ideas, and they just kept going. And that's part of that sort of emphasis on that philosophy's had on sort of diving deep in the hero worship thing. But the pragmatic maxim and the whole idea of sort of using philosophy as a tool to get somewhere, yay, Bob. If you want to look at more practical terms, philosophers throughout the century have been really, really smart guys who thought way too much about stuff that probably didn't get a lot of traction, but every now and then they got a really good idea. They come up with some really cool ideas. And so when you read about philosophers, skim. I know probably people will be upset with me about that, but this is like going to a bar and meeting some really interesting people who've way too interested in the game of magic or other stuff, and just kind of sitting there for 5 or 10 minutes and kind of absorbing what they have to say and saying, whoa, that's pretty cool. And then leaving, right? You don't change your life based on somebody meeting a bar. However, at the same time, you don't start going out because people you meet in the bar have a sort of bad signal to noise ratio. So that's kind of what I want to say, that the American school of pragmatists were much more concerned about effects, and Dewey was much more concerned about effects in regards to education, which is kind of what we're talking about. So he sort of seemed like a good guy to talk about sort of the whole panoply of ideas we're going to go over. Peirce really wanted to talk about how we learn science. Peirce is a hoot. He's a 19th century guy. You'll find that a lot of the really good guys that I consider really good guys for the last 150 years are real oddballs. Wittgenstein was an oddball. Peirce was an oddball. Russell was kind of an oddball. Russell wrote an essay on what the benefits of being lazy. But the real good guys are the guys, of course, did just what I'm talking about. They skimmed across a bunch of stuff, kind of gathered together and reorganized. So that's pragmatism. That's John Dewey. If you're interested, there's some really good wiki pages on him. I skimmed them like yesterday in preparation for the essay. There's also some good biographies. Haven't read them. I'm not going to. I'm Daniel Markham, and I will see you on the internet.